Well, hello, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us to our Meet the Parents event. I was really delighted to be asked to be involved by Richard and Catherine Kirk. Richard and I have talked about apprenticeships on many occasions in my previous life on Inside Business on BBC Radio Ulster. And I must say, I've always been a big fan. I thought Work Plus was a great idea, and I think apprenticeships are a great idea too. And it was really only the other day when I was thinking about it that I realised that part of the reason for that is maybe because actually I was an apprentice. I went to Queen's very briefly, and then I got the journalism bug, and I got a job with the East Antrim Times, which was part of the Belfast Telegraph, and served my indentures there, which is pretty much the same thing. Did my exams at the end of that time, and then I was able to free myself from my indentures and go on. And I can remember clearly when I was in Larne at the East Antrim Times, my university friends were very jealous, not least of my massive pay package, £1,185 a year. So they were all students and were working on considerably less. And I had a very cool flat on the 13th floor of Gardenmore House with a terrific view of Inver Park and Ballylumford Power Station, which came in very handy during the Ulster Workers' Council strike. But I'm really, really looking forward to hearing inspiring stories today from our parents and how their kids really have taken a path which their parents might not have expected, but which I think they're now all really delighted that they did do that. Just a couple of wee bits of housekeeping before we get going. I know there are lots of questions that all of you want to have answered, and we've got lots of them already, but there's a chat function on this, as I'm sure you can see. You're all muted at the moment, apart from the panelists and Richard and me. But please type your questions into the chat thing. I'll keep an eye on it, so will Richard, and we'll try and pick up as many of those as we possibly can in our conversation. Just to let you know as well that the session's being recorded. It'll be posted on the Work Plus YouTube channel, where, by the way, there's lots of other useful, inspirational stuff as well, and information too. And if there's anything you want cleared up, well, Richard's going to be hosting an online apprenticeship clinic on Friday at lunchtime, and we're going to give you more details of that later on once we get going. So we have three parents on our panel today. Richard's on hand as well to take any technical questions. Richard Kirk from Work Plus. So first of all, let's meet the parents if we can. We'll start with Sylvia. Sylvia Dunwoody. Hi, Sylvia.
Hi, Wendy.
Sylvia is a mum of three children. Her daughter Hannah is an apprentice at Loudon Guitars. Sylvia, had you ever imagined that that's where Hannah would end up?
No, never imagined, especially Loudon Guitars. I probably had never heard of them, before she went. I'm sorry to say, but no, I didn't imagine that, but I knew there was a path for her, and it was going to be exciting,
Well, you've three children and they're all following very different career paths. And Hannah was a high academic achiever at school. So tell us how this came about.
Well, my eldest daughter, Julie, she always wanted to be a primary school teacher. So we knew the path that she had to take. She had to go to university and get her degree. And that's what she did. She is now a primary school teacher and lives in Scotland. And she was very lucky that in Scotland, they're guaranteed a year's work after they graduate in primary schools. So my middle daughter, Lindsay, she took up, it was either going to be music or maths. Music was her passion, music technology, and she needed the maths anyway. So she did her A-levels and decided to go to university. But like you, Wendy, she struggled in the first year, which was not like her. And she ended up going to college doing exactly the same thing. She still kept on the music technology and excelled beyond all belief and enjoyed it and made many lovely friends through tutors and things like that. So I knew that there was more than one path with grammar schools. Where grammar schools are concerned, I do feel they push for university. So then whenever Hannah came along and she was more interested in technology and engineering, when she got her GCSEs, which were very, very good marks, and she was asked to pick her A-level results, that was the deciding time. And I spoke to her technology teacher and asked him, would it be a good idea if Hannah was to go to college for an engineering course, and he said that would be a brilliant foundation for her for whatever she wanted to do within the engineering field. So that's what she did. We picked up sticks and she went to Bangor College and thoroughly enjoyed it. I did expect her to stay on to do her HND because I do believe qualifications opens many doors. But this apprenticeship came and we talked about it, and she did ensure me that she would still be studying while being an apprentice, and that's what she's doing. She went to work for Loudon Guitars and loves it, and has a day release class. She's getting paid to do it, and it's all going for her own qualification. So yes, they were all three very different paths that they all took, but all worked out well.
Well, that's brilliant, isn't it? We'll hear more about Hannah and about your feelings on all of this as well as we go along today. Hugh Morgan is with us as well. That's Hugh waving at us now. Now, you're an entrepreneur now, Hugh. You were an emergency planner, live outside Hillsborough, and your daughter Harriet went to Friends and then did her A-levels at the Royal School in Armagh. Now, tell us about Harriet. She's in the second year of her apprenticeship now in Deloitte's as part of the Bright Start scheme.
Yeah, that's she had a bit of a refusal during her AS levels at Friends, and so we did the whole 2 years again at Royal School Armagh. And by the time she left, she was thoroughly fed up with the concept of formal education. And one of the things that I spent a lot of time doing homework, just trying to get her, because she didn't really have a firm idea of what she wanted to do at university. And so I said, well, have you thought about an apprenticeship? And it was, what's one of those? And I talked to her about Deloitte, sent her the Bright Start thing. But I've learned with the girls in my family is that you have to wait till it becomes their idea. And she took the idea of the Bright Start, went to a briefing by Deloitte in Uri, which was arranged by Royal School Armagh, and came back completely convinced that this was the right thing for her to do. We were looking at different options, sort of going abroad for university, so that a lot of language courses now. We're looking at Lyon Business School. She certainly didn't want to stay in Northern Ireland. And then she found out about the Bright Start scheme, and the thing that persuaded her to stay in Northern Ireland was the fact that unlike the Bright Start scheme in London, you get a degree, University of Ulster Business School. So one day a week she goes off to she just goes onto a different screen and does a day a week in this town. Doing a degree, which is free. So she had a bit of a hiccup during this, but I have to say that the Deloitte, we always get worried about our kids. Absolutely brilliant. I'll have a cup of coffee with Harriet, and we'll get this sorted out. And they were absolutely brilliant in terms of and the sort of resilience of their kids. She's an analyst. She as a proper employee. Again, they've been really good during lockdown because she's been working from home. She was given 500 quid by Deloitte to equip a home office. Not quite sure all the articles would qualify as office supplies, but they look after them. Her starting salary was 16.5K, which I think is fantastic, especially that university.
We're kind of losing a wee bit of you from time to time, I'm afraid, Hugh. You were right when you mentioned to us earlier that the internet connection's a wee bit dodgy, but we'll keep the fingers crossed as we go along. David Porter's with us as well, and David's Director of Engineering at the Department for Infrastructure, and he and I have conversed on many occasions, mostly around flooding and things like that. However, we're going to have a nice conversation today when we hear about David's son, Matthew. Now, he's 21, David. He's just completed his apprenticeship with Terex. Tell us about what his experience has been like.
Yeah, so you're right. Matthew finished his higher level apprentice program in the college in Dungannon. That was what was called the Gold program, which is another supported apprenticeship scheme, but it is run through a company called Terex. And Terex supported Matthew through that apprenticeship, and then subsequently he's actually left that company, and he's now in the big bad world working in Canada, much to his mother's annoyance, I have to say. But certainly the whole support that he got through Terex and the ability to earn and learn, as you said in your introduction, was really a fantastic opportunity for Matthew and really suited his way of learning and the way that suited his lifestyle.
Why did you think, or did you think at the time, that that was the right pathway for him to take?
Well, throughout school, other parents here have said about either failure or very, very good success. I think I more characterize Matthew as sort of in that middle ground. He didn't sort of excel at school, but he didn't do badly. He just sort of tolerated it, I think. And whenever it came to deciding about which way he was going to go, it was clear that he much preferred being at home and working in the garage, at tinkering at old cars or working with his hands. So it was very clear that an apprentice route would suit his character and the way that he would like to operate. And I would have to say, it wasn't really until he started to learn engineering that the real rationale behind learning really clicked with him. You know, before that, he was tolerating it because that's what the timetable said, but he had a clear desire to learn whenever he started to learn or to be taught things that actually had a practical application, things that he really wanted to learn and wanted to learn more of. So instead of just doing the bare minimum and getting through and being in that middle pack in school, he really did excel whenever it came to engineering because it suited him, and he had a real hunger for more knowledge in this area.
So he really found his niche. I mean, I wonder what about school? I mean, one of the things that Richard and I used to discuss whenever we were talking about this was, well, one of the obstacles, if I could put it like that, but in inverted commas, to young people going for apprenticeships is quite often parents who would like them to do something else. But another one is the fact that schools can be a bit sniffy about it too. You know, as Sylvia said, you know, they're quite keen on the university path. But was his school supportive, David?
Well, he went to the integrated college in Dungannon, and they were supportive of different paths. Now, I have experience, and I can even talk about my own personal experience now, albeit many years ago, about schools saying that, you know, the only way forward is you have to strive and you have to get your degree, and that's the way forward. And, you know, certainly my career and my personal experience, as well as what I've seen through my son Matthew, is that there are many different routes to success. And what you need to do is find the one that suits your way of learning and where you want to go in life, and also your work-life balance. So there's all sorts of factors that you need to take into consideration in determining what is actually the right pathway forward to you. And a more practical way of learning isn't of a lesser standard. It's just different than maybe a university education. And in many walks of life and in many careers, it's actually a much more sustainable and much more useful foundation to the way forward. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't continue right through the degree level. You know, and that's the real beauty that I see of the modern day apprentice, is that it's not just a craft apprentice, and it's not just an apprentice up to a particular level. It will actually guide you through the whole way up to foundational degree, and then give you a pathway into doing a degree as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And Sylvia, you mentioned as well the fact that you're very keen on the idea of qualifications, that qualifications are what help you to get to wherever it is that you may want to be going. But there are many different ways of getting those qualifications. And I mean, did you need to be persuaded of that, or did you realize that yourself?
No, I think I realized that myself. I knew whatever qualifications you have, no matter where you get them, they will open doors for you. You know, even myself, like a way back in whatever year I was going out to work. I know I didn't go to university or anything, but I did well in my qualifications. And as soon as I started work, my work ethos was to do as best I could, and I just climbed ladders no matter what job I was in at the time. So that to me was the foundation for me to try and put my daughters forward and try to get them to take whatever path was comfortable for them and that they wanted to go on.
And it sounds like Hannah was lucky as well, in that she had support from school in this, and was able to move to the right place at the right time.
Yes. Now it was her own decision, and with myself to leave grammar school after GCSE to go to college, but for her apprenticeship, it was the encouragement of the college, the tutors that she was surrounded with, you know, and they just knew she was very capable of and encouraged her to go along that path as well. And we're very good at making me feel better about it, because I was a wee bit apprehensive about her going on an apprenticeship instead of staying at college and going further with her education.
Was just to pick you up on that point, I'll go to Hugh in just a wee second. I see he's back with us, which is great. But was it news to you that there were so many different kinds of apprenticeships? I mean, did you have maybe a bit of a preconceived idea of what an apprenticeship might include?
Yes, well, you go out to work and you learn your trade, you know, because I was my husband and I, we ran a business for 20 years in the construction industry, and we had many apprentices that came to work for us. The odd one or two maybe would have went to college as day release. And I also worked in the shipyard. So a person getting a trade and going on an apprenticeship was just being brought up from the bottom and being trained by the people around them, the experienced ones, you know. So yeah, but it's very different now, I would say.
And Hugh, for Harriet, it's a really different ball game, isn't it? I'm sure 10 years ago, we would never have realized that there was the potential of an apprenticeship with someone like Deloitte's, or some of the companies and organizations that I've seen tweeting and on social media in this apprenticeship week, like AJ Bell, who look after my pension and are looking for people to be apprentices. I thought it might apply, actually. And the Royal Horticultural Society and so on. And then you realize that there are a lot of organizations like the RHS that actually couldn't manage without apprentices and without bringing on young people into areas that otherwise they might never have thought about.
I think it also provides for those, I mean, they do it for the tax reasons. Let's not kid ourselves. They get a huge tax rebate for a certain, I think it's over 3,000 employees. And if you don't do it, you're penalized financially. So it makes sense for them to do it. But I would say two things. First of all, with a graduate, you can go along and go into university and you can pick up some really bad habits. It's great fun, but Harriet has to be up online at 9 o'clock every day during the week. And it's not a matter of skipping lectures. She has to be there, and she's doing real work. I mean, she spent some time basically delivering or checking on delivery of COVID tests to care homes. That's real work. She's working on a Virgin project at the moment. So she knows that she's got to be there, and she's got real responsibility. And also, the fact that she's got an income right from the start means that we've been able to get her on the housing ladder. In fact, she shares a house with three other Deloitte employers, all of whom are graduates. So fortunately, they're helping to pay her mortgage at the moment. So, you know, getting on that into the world of work right at the start, I think, is a real advantage. And I think the other aspect is, if you start at graduate, you have a certain expectation of how you're going to be treated at work, because you're a graduate. You've invested a huge amount of money and 3 years of your life into getting this qualification. Often work doesn't see it quite that way. You're the new boy or the new girl. There's the photocopier, get it photocopied. And yeah, I'm sorry, but having to do some of, you know, the menial tasks in work and work your way up through the hierarchy is an extremely good life experience, you know, however precious we may think about ourselves or our children.
Well, certainly I know whenever I was at work, for about the last 10 years, any cup of tea that I was brought in the studio had been made for me by someone with at least 2 degrees, one of them a master's. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We have hundreds of people online here today, and we had hundreds of questions. I'm going to just pick a kind of random selection of some of the ones that came in. And just from what you were saying there, Hugh, you know, it's hard work. Harriet's at her laptop at 9 o'clock in the morning. When our apprenticeships all work and no play, you know, one of the attractive things maybe about taking a different path like university or whatever is that you can pick up some of those bad habits. Some of us picked up rather a large number of them.
Well, certainly the induction program that was run by Deloitte was in England. And I tell you, if my employer had ever provided me with a hotel of that quality, I would have been impressed, but they never did. And so, you know, how you get a mobile phone, a laptop, a company credit card. Now, you know, I used to have to sort of fill in chits saying, you know, I had a cup of coffee or I had a lunch away from work. But none of that, you know, you got 20 quid on your credit card for lunch. So they actually treat them extremely well. I was, you know, severe amount of jealousy when she started and sending me the photographs of the hotel room. And certainly with Deloitte, not now during lockdown, which is probably good for her liver, but some of the, you know, after work events that they run were pretty epic. So I don't think at all that she has missed out on the student, and she's got lots of friends who are students, you know, friends from school. Some in, she's been visiting them in Liverpool and Edinburgh, but certainly during lockdown, I think the feeling is from them is they're not getting very good value for money. You know, they have 1 or 2 lectures remotely a week. They paid for their paid 9,000 for their degree. They paid for their student accommodation. They're stuck at home, and they're not really getting a very good service. So you know, it wasn't obviously one of the things that factored our consideration about her career path, but it has worked out remarkably well.
David, what about Matthew? When obviously he was having to work pretty full on as well as doing his training. How did he and how did you regard that? Was it still a bit of fun for him?
Yeah, well, the beauty about the apprenticeship that Matthew did was that in the first couple of years there was more study time and less in the factory. So in the first year there was 2 days of day release and 3 days in the factory, and then in the second year then it changed to a single day in college, albeit a long day, and then 4 days in the factory. So that gave the benefit of sort of easing them into full-time work of 5 days and then 6 days a week working in the factory. So it was a nice balance. There was also flexibility shown the other way, because as Matthew got into the more advanced stages, they didn't require him to come in on all days or every week to the college. And the big advantage of that was that Terex then didn't necessarily keep him within the factory. He was able to go over to England to work at machines, and he was able to go over to machinery shows in Germany. and he was able to do some stuff online, and he was able to defer some stuff until he was able to come back. So there was flexibility shown both by the college, because they were used to delivering apprentice programs like this. And indeed, I think that's really what gave him itchy feet. And as I said earlier, why he's now in Canada, because he realized that work wasn't something that you necessarily had to do.
All right, I think we've lost David temporarily there, but let's hope we can get him back in just a second. Sylvia, we had another question about a couple, well, in fact, a number of parents asking specifically about apprenticeship opportunities for girls. Would you like to comment on that perhaps?
I think it's very different today. You wouldn't have seen many girls in the engineering, never mind the joinery and the plumbing and all the rest of it, and way back in our day. But nowadays, I think it's far more acceptable. And also the workplace, you know, you think your daughter going into a male dominant workplace, she'll struggle, but she has earned respect of being in the workplace, and also being at college within a very male dominant course at college. So no, she's not having any difficulties that way.
Well, that's good to hear, and obviously for Harriet, it's opened doors for her too. I'm conscious that we haven't brought Richard in yet, and we got lots of questions about the nuts and bolts, if I could put it like that. That's probably not relevant nowadays, unless you're David's son Matthew. But the widgets and things, you know, how does it work? You know, talk us through some of those logistics. How do you apply, Richard? You know, what are the timings? How do you find out? I mean, there are 140 questions here, and a whole lot of them are about what are the opportunities and how do you find out about them. So talk us through a bit of that, if you could.
Thanks, Wendy. It's been great to listen to the conversation so far. This is exactly what we had hoped for. This is an event by parents for parents. Quite often we have employers, apprentices on a panel, but what we wanted to do was to help those in the audience have an experience where they see from firsthand, and it's just great to hear the stories that are being shared and to see the questions coming in too. So thank you for those. Really, Work Plus for Catherine and I really started because we had 20 years experience in youth work, and then also had experience in business as well. So we heard the frustration on both sides ultimately. So we heard the frustration from young people, parents, from the schools as well, about how do you take that next step after school, and how do you get into that first job, and student debt that just feels really, really massive. And then on business side, it was just where are the people we want to bring in and mold talent. We don't just want to have to bring in graduates that are sometimes very self-assured and need the edges knocked off them. We'd rather mold them from the start. So since 2016, we've helped 145 apprentices into a variety of companies. And this year, we're working with 65 businesses. And the purpose of Work Plus is to change how our culture views apprenticeships. And that's really by creating an apprentice marketplace, I guess you would call it. So for applicants or parents, and encouraging their sons or daughters to apply, it's like UCAS for apprenticeships. So what we do is we coordinate the process. So our applications have been open since the middle of January, and they close at the end of February. Now that's not for every apprenticeship in Northern Ireland, unfortunately, not just yet, but we can hopefully move towards that at some stage, company by company. But we've got 150 opportunities across those 65 businesses, and we're working with the manufacturing NI, we're working with the construction industry as well. We've also got IT firms in the mix. So there's a really good variety, and they're of all different levels. They're for people who maybe won't get 5 D2G GCSEs, but they're also for those young people that will maybe leave school with top A levels. There's an apprenticeship for everybody. So really our platform is where we direct people to, and maybe a useful time just to show some of the examples, if that's okay, Mandy.
Surely.
Of the types. So hopefully, if I share my screen, you can see that. So we've created a place really where you can read more about becoming an apprentice, and you can look at the different options that are available. What we've done is we've created an Apprenticeship Explorer because it's quite hard. There's no one place in Northern Ireland that you can see all the apprenticeship types in one place. So we went and we tried to create something which was a bit more user friendly, so you can browse by sector, so you can go in here and have a look at different types. So say if we pick out, for example, civil engineering, you'll see here this one says apply now, so you can actually click on that and go and make your application. So it's a very simple process to do that. You can apply for as many as you like, but the good thing about this is that we've already got the companies lined up backstage, if you want to think of it like that. So that means that whenever you come to apply, you're filling out one application and ranking those companies in order of preference, or saying, no, I definitely don't want to work for that company, but I'd love to work for these ones. So you're only having to apply once to the employers. There are some types that we maybe don't have apprenticeships in just yet. And if that's of interest to you, for example, childcare, we don't have any companies that are looking in that space. You can just go in here and register your interest, and then we will notify you if we get companies on board. So really just trying to make it an easier way for parents to advise their sons and daughters about how to become an apprentice. And then the process then is in March, there'll be shortlisting, and in April then the interviews will take place. And one thing we've started to include is aptitude testing. I know that might sound a little overkill, but what we're trying to say there is it's not, the companies that we work with don't just want people who have got good grades. They're looking for the whole person. So that's why we've introduced that online test, and we've got really good feedback on that so far. We're working with a company called Talent Census as well, and they are really about helping understand the real person, all those hidden skills that they can bring to that job role. And that's really what the companies are looking for. It's not just all about the grades.
That's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, I can remember having Diljit Rana on one of our programs on one occasion, and he said that whenever he was recruiting for any of his hotels, he wasn't actually interested in their qualifications. He just wanted them to be enthusiastic. He wanted to teach them how to do what it was that he wanted them to do, rather than them having learned it somewhere else and having to unlearn one part and relearn another bit as well. Hugh brought something up there where he was saying that it made economic sense for companies because there was government money involved. But there was a really interesting piece in the Guardian yesterday, actually, about 3 different companies who had taken on apprentices. One of them is a company in the south of England called Cornish, where they make plates and what have you, 150,000 pieces a year, and it's hand decorated and glazed and so on. They've had a huge increase in sales in 2020, presumably because we were all at home throwing the plates at one another, or deciding that we never liked them in the first place and we needed something else. But anyway, they were saying that actually it's been a brilliant way for them to recruit rather than going into the general jobs market. And it's allowed us to tap into a really good resource of people who want to learn and who aren't coming here with any bad habits from similar industries, which is what many of you have referred to. And he said it's also very satisfying to teach them a skill that they'll have for the rest of their lives. I mean, David, you must in your career have had people coming in at various levels who were apprentices and so on. I mean, there is something enormously rewarding about helping a young person who wants to learn and you know, who is looking to you for some kind of assistance and guidance. And for companies, that must actually be quite a kind of wholesome experience, I'd have thought.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, because I've personally gained an awful lot of benefit through my career as a civil engineer. And so it's very good to be able to give that experience back to somebody else and to give a little bit back to the industry. And I do that partially through supporting both our apprentices within the department and also our graduate civil engineers. So there's something very personally rewarding. You're absolutely right. And I do hope that they have learned from me and learned from the mistakes that I've made and from my experiences, and that makes them better at their job going forward as well.
And Hugh, just to bring you back in, perhaps, I mean, one of the other interesting elements of an apprenticeship is that, well, they're mostly young people, but of course that's not always the case, because you can have an apprenticeship at any age. But if you have a company that is in desperate need an injection of youth into some of its processes, you know, whether they be some social media or technology or just kind of street savviness. You know, who knows, it might be a company that needs to know about the current top 10, if such a thing still exists. You know, then you have that on tap in your hand immediately, don't you?
Well, I think so. And coming back to what you're saying, it does allow a company to see an individual over a long period and decide whether they, once they finish their apprenticeship, want to give them a full-time job. And you know, with normal interview procedures, there's an awful lot of coaching that goes on, and you know, people are very well prepared. But are you actually seeing the individual? Are you seeing the person? Or are you seeing the preparation? And really what I think Hutelia hit it on the head is that you want to see whether people have got the interpersonal skills and their discipline and enthusiasm for the job. And really that's all you need. A long time ago, I used to run the training for recruits coming into the British Army and run an army training regiment. So we had you know, several hundred young men and women there at any one time, and for a lot of them it was a huge shock. It was the first time that they'd been away from home. Mum had done everything for them. We had to train not just military skills, but we had to train a lot of social skills, teamwork. You know, teamwork is neglected, and I think that's going to be one of the casualties of COVID, because kids now are not interacting with each other. They're not playing sport. They're not having those social ties that was so important. You know, that's what my girls are really missing. But at the end of the process, I always used to get the parents at the pass-out parade coming on to me and saying, "He's so tall." Oh, yeah, but he's standing up straight for the first time in his life. You know, and I always get the younger sibling pushed towards me. Can you take them? Can you take that? So, but we knew, because we got over that 12-week period, got to know them, every aspect of them, that they were going to then fit in after they'd done the next phase of their training. Now, you know, how do companies replicate that? Well, it's very, very difficult. And, you know, we had a high percentage of kids say, "Oh, this isn't for me." And again, the last thing you want as an employer is to have somebody who doesn't really want to be there. And if you've spent, I mean, we used to, this was 20 years ago, spent £7,000 recruiting someone into the army. You don't want to just see them walk out the gates the next day. So you work really hard to keep them. And civilian employers have exactly the same thing. They invest heavily in these people. And, you know, I was talking to an American company a couple of years ago about why they were doing cybersecurity. And the reason they like Northern Ireland employees is, A, they work for half the price they'd have to pay in America, but B, they stay and they're loyal. And that's what a company wants. You invest that money into that individual and they stay. They're not looking to move on for a better salary, different experience after every 6 months.
I wonder, Sylvia, what about Hannah? Have you seen her kind of change through her apprenticeship? I mean, I suppose, when, you know, all young people do, whether they're at university or wherever they go, but I just wonder what changes you've seen in her, maybe in her attitudes or whatever.
Well, with Hannah being the baby of my family, we all protected and sheltered her, but she doesn't need protection and sheltered anymore. She has a mind of her own, and she's a very independent young lady. She's out in the workplace. I see her very confident. She has taken on challenges and doesn't worry about them. She has to deal with daily chores and daily responsibilities now that she's out in the workplace. So I find that she has come on leaps and bounds since going to Loudon Guitars. They're very good with her, and they give her respect, and you know, they look to her for guidance as well, some of the boys and things like that, you know, so it's lovely. She's become very independent and very responsible and confident. Yes.
Well, that's great, isn't it? So there have been really key benefits as far as you're concerned, as far as she's concerned, from the apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm. And also she's very financially independent, which is, you know,
happy days.
Doesn't look to mommy for money anymore. So that's, you know, that's something that when they're at school, they don't have to deal with financial things, you know, and then they go out to the workplace and have to pay for things themselves. But it's great because she's financially independent as well, you know.
Well, that's a double bonus, isn't it, really? There have been quite a lot of questions coming in, Richard, about young people who might have special or additional needs. One that I saw there that was about a young person who is dyslexic and various other ones as well. I wonder, what would you advise as far as that's concerned? I mean, how do employers regard young people with special or additional needs when they're looking at apprenticeships?
I think we realize right across society, employers are becoming much more accommodating of the variety of abilities that their staff do have, rather than disabilities. And there have been many employers we work with that have made those adjustments to the working practice. And one of the things about an apprenticeship as well is that you are, whilst you're an employee of the company that you're working for, there is an element of pastoral care that you'll receive from the training provider, whether that's college or university. And plus the government then support you in that as well with another organisation that likes of Disability Action or Trudville, which can often help people who maybe have needs, especially related to the autistic spectrum. So that there's plenty of support available, but first and foremost, employers are starting to make reasonable adjustments, because they realize that if they don't, the talent that is within these young people is going to fall through their grasp, and they don't want to risk doing that. So, well,
that's good to hear, isn't it? Because I know it's one of the big concerns about COVID is that really it has clobbered many opportunities for people who either are disabled or have various other difficulties. That, you know, if you're vulnerable, you're basically locked in your house at the moment. So that's all been a bit tricky, but let's hope it sorts out. One of the other things that I saw that you had written about, Richard, was the fact that, you know, young people have been very much recognized as among the main victims of the pandemic. You know, it's made life very difficult for them. You know, Hugh was saying that his daughters miss getting out, and you know, we all have young people in our lives who are struggling with it all at the moment. But you feel that they could be part of the solution. Tell us a bit about why that's the case.
Well, Princess Trust were very, very quick to come out in March last year and say that young people were feeling like they're hopeless and their future is lost. And whilst I'm not trying to diminish that some young people may have felt like that, the media can be a terrible place for that sort of message, because the reality is that we're working with 65 businesses that are growing. We're working with CITB, which is the Construction Industry Training Board, and they've brought together a group of small construction companies that have got a lot of demand and want to bring and train up young people especially with an aging workforce as well. So I'll give you an example of Dara. So Dara works for Charles Brand, which is a construction company. He finished his A-levels last year, and he's just started a quantity surveying degree level apprenticeship. And maybe later on I can show you just a bit of an idea of the different levels of apprenticeship. I think that's always quite useful for busting some myths. So Dara is living in the Holy Lands with his mates that he went to school with, because he still wants to live with his mates, even though they're not apprentices, they're full-time students. So full-time Zoomers for 3 hours a day, and they can't get a job in the spa or the bar, and they're looking to him for money to try and help them get through the week. And he's the one getting out of bed in the morning, going to work, using his head and his hands to make a difference. And that has such a massive impact on his well-being. Like for all of us, if we've got something to get up and get out the door, or well, open the door to the front room and go in there in the morning. If we've got a reason to do that, that's going to have a significant impact on the rest of our life. And I think a lot of what we're seeing is down to that. And whilst we're talking tonight and thinking about parents and young people, apprenticeships are also a great way for people to retrain. And I think the message around COVID as well is there will be some jobs that won't make it through once furlough's turned off. But an apprenticeship is a great way for someone to retrain into a sector which is absorbed and bounce back.
Well, that's good to hear. And there are a couple of very straight questions coming in here, and I see you've been double jobbing here, Richard, and answering all of these questions on the chat at the same time as keeping an eye on the four of us and answering some of my questions too. But I see Samuel asking, what's the range of salary during an engineering apprenticeship? And you were able to answer that for him.
Well, there's an apprentice minimum wage, which you might have heard about, and I hope you're sitting down. It's currently £3.80 an hour. Now, none of the companies that we work with want to be paying at that level. They want to be paying well for these roles, and the majority of the businesses that we're working with have agreed to a maximum starting salary depending on the level of apprenticeship. I think this is maybe just a useful time just to flick up a diagram which might help us think through what these different levels are.
Yeah.
So just bear with me 2 seconds. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully that's a very clear diagram. I appreciate there's a lot in that, but if you can just bear with me for a second. We're used to thinking about qualifications like GCSE, A-level, HND. Maybe haven't heard foundation degree so much, but it's really the new currency for HND or HNC. So there are apprenticeships at level 2, which are delivered by colleges or private training providers, and they are equivalent to GCSEs and A-level. So what we're trying to show here is that it's not like you're going off down a cul-de-sac with an apprenticeship, that there's always a progression route, so that you can start out at level 2. You can move on to level 3. You can even move right on through if you've got the ability and the desire to do that, and your employer wants to back you in that space. So what we've done with the companies we work with is we've agreed to a maximum starting salary, and for level 3 apprentice, that is up to £15,000, and that's with no student fees. So £15,000 full salary, working 4 days a week, 1 day a week in college typically. For the level 5 apprenticeship, which is foundation degree equivalent, the starting salary there is up to 18,000, and for the degree level, which is level 6, that would be 19,000. So that's only just the starting salary. We were talking to one of the companies we work with, and they've had to restructure their whole salary banding because of the apprentices have disrupted it, because they found that these apprentices are so much more useful than graduates. And but they couldn't pay them within and commensurate with that. So they had to reorganize their whole salary banding. And we now have some apprentices after 3 years earning in the mid 30s thousands because of the job that they're able to do. So it's not about the input. It's not about what you've achieved in the qualification space. It's what you're able to do for that business. And after 3 years, the company is delighted to be able to pay someone £35,000 because that's what they're worth to the business.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Goodness me. There are lots of different questions coming in about different areas of work, shall we say. Carol's been asking about the film and television industry. Somebody else was asking, were there opportunities in animation? I saw someone asking, could you do an engineering degree through an apprenticeship? Business management apprenticeships, are there any of those? I mean, you said, Richard, that you can kind of go onto your website and basically click on any of those different areas and find out whether there are or aren't yet opportunities in those fields. I assume you're chasing the ones where there aren't.
Yes, there are 208 different types of apprenticeship, and you can look at those through our Apprenticeship Explorer. And that's to give you a flavour of what are the ones that are out there. unfortunately, there just are some industries that, you know, the film industry has really started to boom here, but there just isn't the apprenticeship developed in that space just yet, the same in animation. But those again are, it's about us getting those companies and working with the training providers together to try and then develop the apprenticeship so that could be one you apply for. But I'll give you an example. We even just talked to a few law firms in the last couple of weeks, and they're keen to start to explore a legal apprenticeship, because a lot of the apprenticeships to date are mostly STEM areas, so science, technology, engineering, and maths. It would be great to have an HR apprenticeship, a legal apprenticeship, an animation apprenticeship. So those are the things that we're working at behind the scenes with government and with the colleges and the universities to try and do. In the engineering space, yes, there is a foundation degree apprenticeship, but unfortunately just not one at degree level just yet, although they're working on that.
Well. And just to pick you up there, you said you're hoping that there may be a law apprenticeship at some point. I suppose law and accountancy are kind of at other opposite ends of the seesaw for people very often. I mean, the accountancy apprenticeships seem to have been hugely successful.
Oh, they really have. Each of the 6 further education colleges run those, and it's been really good for big accountancy firms, but also accounting within other types of industry. So we just started working with Atchison and Glover, and they're based out in Dungannon. And they make bricks and paving slabs and those sorts of things. But they're looking for accountant apprentices this year, and it's actually been one of the most popular so far. So we've had about 50 applications for that. So it is really, you know, it's getting more and more competitive as time goes on. But we just would really encourage applications to come in, because that allows us to talk to new companies and say, well, we've already got applicants coming here, have a look and in this talent pool, and you can bring these applicants into your business.
That's interesting, David, isn't it? I mean, you will have worked with big companies over the years, and you tend to think of them as being an engineering company, or, you know, that company that makes bricks or whatever. But then you realize that they do, as they have a zillion other fields within that organization as well. And I can remember speaking, I think it was CDE Global that we had on Inside Business on one occasion, who had just done an audit of the skills that they had within their company. And they had 17 completely different skill sets, from marketing to making the crunching machines and all of that sort of stuff. So, I mean, these organizations have so many different directions in which you can go.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And even if I look at my own profession, being a civil engineer, yes, you need qualified civil engineers to sign off particular bits of design. But whenever you actually look at the whole range of skills that are needed to deliver a civil engineering project, it's not only those people that hold a civil engineering qualification that are required. It's a whole range of disciplines and a whole range of different skills and different types of people. And also something interesting has changed over the last few years. Industries are being disrupted. There are new players coming in to different industries, and they are thinking differently and are challenging the old ways of thinking and the old ways that projects were delivered. And certainly by talking to some of the big civil engineering companies, particularly over in England, they're less concerned about their traditional civil engineering companies being their competitors, and they're more concerned about an upstart, an Amazon or a technology company looking differently at the way to deliver projects and coming in and seeing the world from a different angle. And some of the new technology companies are really challenging how we think and being very, very disruptive in terms of the way that we would have had a traditional view of project delivery. So again, that's where an agile, modern apprenticeship scheme can really react to that change in the market and the way that we're delivering business.
Oh, that's fascinating, isn't it? Sylvia, there's a question that's come in from Jill here. And she says, are schools promoting and supporting this? This is the first information I've had. And she says, I'm the mum of a 16-year-old. That's a problem sometimes, isn't it?
Yes. I don't ever remember any of my girls being spoken about apprentices in the grammar school. But in the college, both Lindsay and Hannah were both spoken about apprentices and it would come into the colleges of what apprenticeships were available at that time, and it was up to them if they wanted to apply. So a lot more in the college than what there would have been in the grammar school, yes.
Hugh, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I mean, I know I'm looking back to the kind of dim, dark recesses of time, but when I can remember at one stage I wanted to be a geologist and I was told not to be silly, that girls couldn't go on an oil rig. I wasn't sure it was an oil rig I was thinking of, but anyway. But there was certainly no mention of anything other than being a nurse or a teacher or maybe going to university. And there is still a bit of a kind of narrow focus, isn't there, for particularly for many grammar schools? How do you shake them out of that and let them, maybe they should listen to what David was just saying about disruptors and how that's going to move things forward?
Yeah, I think it boils down to, I think probably the family needs to help. If they're not getting that from the school environment, I've always been a bit of a contrarian. I've always sort of think, well, surely there's got to be a better way of doing this. And just looking at the way that we have structured the education, the further education of our children, where, in England, you pay £9,000 a year. Well, that's 27,000 student debt, paying 6%. Okay, you've then got to pay for your travel to and from. You've then got to pay for your student digs. You've got to pay for your food. Well, do you know, it's very easy to amass a debt of £60,000 by the age of 21. Or you can start working. And then, with Harriet, after 3 years, well, she's amassed, say, £50,000. Well, that's a difference of £110,000. Well, that's a house. So it's, I was just saying, if you're really passionate, if you really know what you want to go and do at university, fantastic. But she was talking about, business studies, talking about international business studies. I said, great. Well, there are some really good English language degrees in Amsterdam and France. And I said, a hell of a lot cheaper. So, why don't you look at that? Because, I'm a great believer in the sort of value for money. But I think when you look at the eventual effect of what you're trying to achieve after 3 or, in Harriet's case, 5 years of an apprenticeship, you've got that work experience and you've got a degree. And I said to her, well, what do you want to do? She said, well, I don't want to work for Deloitte. Okay, I probably won't share that. But I said, well, what do you want to do? I want to go traveling. Well, great, but you can afford to do it. And when you come back into the workplace, no one's ever going to ask you, so what was the name of the company you used to work for? Because everybody's heard of Deloitte. So wherever she ends up work, she will have got a degree and she will have got an apprenticeship from, one of the top management consultancy firms in the world. So I said, well, listen, that gives you a great stable footing for whatever you choose to go off and do. And I mean, now I have Alexandra, who's 16, and what are we going to do with her life? And again, she doesn't want to go to university. At the moment, she's talking about becoming a bandswoman in the Royal Marines Band, probably one of the best marching bands in the world. So we were watching the selection process and the sort of look at life thing that, on YouTube the other day together. And she said, oh, I really want to do that. And it's this idea, and we've met a couple of one of the buglers and one of the flautists from the band who are going through the whole system at the moment. And they said, it's a fantastic team working environment. You can get a degree doing it, and you can travel the world under normal circumstances. So I think, really we need to have a discussion with our children and say, what do you want out of this whole process? And I think the difficulty nowadays is kids have so many different opportunities. They're spoiled for choice. We weren't.
Well, we were quite lucky. We had a pretty good chance of getting a job, hadn't
Yeah,
we?
yeah, yeah.
Not necessarily the case at the moment, I suppose. So on that point of at the moment, Richard, and will employers be taking on apprenticeships and taking on apprentices rather in these COVID days? I mean, are you confident that will still be the case?
Well, David talked a bit about disruption and of technology. I think COVID has disrupted everything. But what we've found is that a lot of businesses have been really successful and have bounced back. And it's about helping young people into jobs in those growing sectors. And an apprenticeship is the best way because there's a job at the start, not the hope of the job at the end of the qualification. So the businesses that we're working with are very keen, and we know that there are other businesses out there in Northern Ireland that will be recruiting. I know that some of the apprenticeships that aren't on offer with the companies that we work with, you can go directly to the local college or to the university and apply directly there. So I'd encourage you to do that if you don't see the ones that you're looking for through Work Plus. So there's plenty of opportunities this coming year, and the deadline's 26th of February for Work Plus.
Great. I was just going to ask you that actually. And I mean, we're pretty much out of time here, but just as a sort of wrap up, I mean, just remind us, Richard, how do you apply? You just gave us the timings there, 26th of February, which is a Friday fortnight, I think, for the application, and you apply by going online the way you showed us earlier on.
Yeah, it's just a very simple application form. You can apply for as many types as you like, and this Friday, I'll just put up a slide just to remind everyone of that. So this Friday, we're holding a session just over lunchtime for you as parents or for your sons or daughters, just to help you think through that application and what you might want to include in that, what the employers are looking for. So it'd be great to see you there. We'll send out a link to that following tonight's session. But no, it's been really good to have the questions come in and to hear from the parents.
Oh, that's great. And just one kind of final question. Whenever, say I've decided I'm going to apply, I go onto your website and click on those various links. What kind of competition am I up against? And how much competition is there for each of the apprenticeship places?
What we found in the last couple of years is that we have on average between 5 and 6 applications per apprenticeship place. So those are pretty good odds. You know, there's not, you could be a lot worse than that. We are finding, as I say, a lot more applications this year than last year, which is great. There's the variety there, but that then allows us, rather than letting that put you off, that then allows us to go and find more companies and get them on board because we found the applicants already. So I encourage you to get your application in as soon as you can and join the session on Friday.
Give it your best shot.
Yes.
Richard, thanks a million. Could I also say a really big thanks to Hugh Morgan, to David Porter, and to Sylvia Dunwoody. Thank you so much for your experiences and for sharing your kids' experience with us as well. And good luck to them, and good luck to all of you. Hope you get your job soon. I've had mine. Yeah, I know I'm ancient, but sure, there you go. But one of those things, and I managed to do it all online, well, apart from the job. But just to remind you, if you're still watching there, please go to www.workplus.app.app. Applications close at 1 o'clock on Friday, the 26th of February. And this session's been recorded, so you'll be able to catch up with it on the Work Plus YouTube channel. And as Richard mentioned as well, he'll be running that online apprenticeship clinic on Friday at lunchtime from 1 to 1:45. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Totally fascinating. Good luck if you're applying, or if your young people are. Hope it goes really well for you, and that you enjoy your apprenticeship and subsequent career. I enjoyed mine in both ways. So thanks again. Have a good evening if you can. Cold.